Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Quantum Health Connection podcast. My name is Heather Crimson, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, Vanessa Baldwin. And today we have a very chilly episode. We are going to be talking about cold thermogenesis. And I'm surprised, Vanessa, that we're at 100 episodes almost, and we have somehow, there's so much to talk about in the quantum world, including homeopathy, that we haven't yet not discussed cold thermogenesis. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? We've had so many amazing guests come on the show, and we've had, just so many fun topics to talk about that we haven't really had like one episode dedicated to cold therapy. I know we have two episodes on winter, which we kind of touched on it, but we haven't had like one specific episode on it. So here we're finally getting it done today.
Yes, yes, it's a must. Well, in
Yes,
the winter time, so appropriate, right?
apparently, yeah.
Yeah.
So please want to just remind everybody, if you can, please rate and review the podcast. This really helps the show grow, especially written reviews. And we just want to reach more people with this incredible information. So we really appreciate that subscribing and giving us feedback. You can also reach us on Bright Light Wellness, which is my YouTube channel, and Enlightened Mood, which is Heather's. So reach us over there too as well, and let us know your questions. That's a great place on YouTube to for us to interact with you and to offer responses to questions that you guys have. So check us out over there as well. But yeah, I'm excited to dive into cold therapy, how it supports your health. And I really want to focus on the do's and don'ts of cold therapy too. Like, because, sometimes I think that everybody's doing the ice bucket challenge and everybody wants to do it, right? And of course, cold therapy has amazing benefits, but there's a lot of nuance to this conversation, 100%, especially with women, especially with cycling women, especially weaker constitutions that are, chronically ill. So there's a lot of nuance to this conversation that I'm excited to dive in with you, Heather, about.
Yes, likewise.
Hmm.
So it's kind of something when you talk to people who've never heard about any of this stuff, they're like, why would I want to do that? That sounds awful. And you get kind of a really like, this kind of response. And I've had seriously like a love-hate relationship with it because I was one of those, like many women, with the hormonal imbalance and the low thyroid and all these things, because I didn't have my light environment optimized. I wasn't, getting the things that I needed. So I was always freezing, like freezing. I'd be the one sleeping before I knew how horrific they were. The heating pad, I know it's just like awful. And then I transitioned to the hot water bottle. And sometimes even now I will do that because I've been ill. And so this cold, I'll be extra cold and then I'll need that external heat source. So the thought of getting cold, before, when I was less healthy, it was just totally unappealing. And I get it that some people would think like, how could that actually be helpful? And it is a stressor. Like, it's hormesis.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're actually using the cooler temperatures to help your body to not execute, but to engage in certain processes that it may not otherwise engage in, because we live in this perennial artificial environment where it's always, I don't know, whatever you keep your thermostat on, 65 or 72 or whatever it may be, that's your comfort level, that our body never has to adapt and adjust to the seasonal variations.
Oh yeah, 1,000,000%. Yeah. So cold is not my favorite thing either. I'll be the first to admit it. I have a constitutional layer for sure that just doesn't love cold. And my genetics, like not my genetics, but my haplotype, where my ancestry is from, I should be really good at making energy from cold, but I don't know. Sometimes I've noticed, especially for me, my brother is very big into cold. So he was the one who was like, he could cold plunge every day. I think he overdoes it personally too, and that messes with his hormones, honestly. But I think for women, they're more sensitive. But he loves it because it gives him so much energy and he feels so much better. And he loves the benefits. But even he was wise enough to know when he just had a cold recently, kind of like a cold flu, to lay off, which is good because that's one of the cautions I would say. My point is, I was first introduced to cold from him, and he was like, I was in a very sick, debilitated state. I was down to 95 pounds. I was in a lot of inflammation, a lot of things going on. He's like, just try the cold, try the cold. I mean, this is when I still had chronic depression and chronic pain. And he was like, just try the cold with me. So I'm like, okay. So we go to my mom's house and he's like chopping the ice, literally,
Oh
in
my
the
goodness.
in the pool. Okay.
Oh,
And I've my bathing suit and I've got my snow hat on and I did it. And I waited in for 2 minutes and I did it, right?
oh
I did it.
wow.
And then after I got out, I was like, it was like I got a severe headache, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Right? So this is a sign that that was too stressful for my body, and it took me way too long to heat back up. So if you're going to
Mhm.
start cold therapy, that is absolutely the worst way to start it. You don't want to just like jump in to, 30-degree water for 2 minutes when you've never adapted to cold before. So it's a slow, gradual progression to teaching your body how to use cold and adapting to it. Just like with the sun, right? We have to like slowly adapt to the UV as it gets higher. In the winter, we want to slowly adapt to using cold, right? And now I
Mhm.
also prefer to cold plunge when it's warmer out. And that's me. Like in the wintertime, the way I use cold therapy now is a lot more cold exposure. So I'll go outside, tie my hair up, and get a lot of cold on my neck to activate brown fat. Or I'll stand outside barefoot even through the winter, or I'll walk in the snow through the winter. Not for long, just a few minutes, right? Because the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet are really gelatinous, so they take in that cold faster, so it works quicker if you walk on snow or something like that. So that's how I do cold. I don't really jump into these 30-degree temperature waters anymore. I don't think that's smart for my body. So I do a lot more cold exposure through just the cold air, which takes a lot longer, right, to get the same benefits. But the really, really cold, cold water is too stressful for my body through the winter. But in the spring through fall, I can do a little bit more of that because what I can do is I can do it outside, right? I can get into like a 40 or, a 50-degree, which honestly I think is adequate. I don't think we have to go that cold. I don't think we need to go down to 30 degrees. I think like a 40, 50 is fine. So in the spring through fall, I can do that and then immediately lay in the sun. And that feels good when I'm bouncing back and forth between the heat and the cold. But when it's cold outside, you're not getting me in a cold plunge because I'm just not like, I'm just not going to jump it. Like, it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel right. And ancestrally, I don't know that they would have done that. I mean, maybe they would have had to bathe, so they would have to use some cold water, but I think they just probably forego bathing a lot as much in the wintertime than they did in the spring through fall, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my thoughts on all of that. So that was a mouthful, but don't do what I did in your first cold exposure because that is not the way to do it. You have to
Yeah, it's a
really,
shock.
yeah, it's such a stressor to the body. Yeah,
I think your body was in shock and it told you that it was way too much. So it then,
yes,
you had some pretty immediate symptoms.
yes.
And that's what we have to learn. Like, I think the benefit of at least trying in a very judicious way, right? Start off slow. The benefit of it is you really get more in touch with your body, Vanessa. Like, you can really start to, because we don't get
Mhm.
taught to be attuned to our physicality and the symptoms. We think all symptoms are bad or they're just a nuisance. Well, actually, they're messages. Your body's giving you feedback of how it's experiencing its environment, including your internal terrain of your thoughts and emotions and all of that. So I first started it with some face dunking.
Mhm.
When
Oh,
I,
much
well,
better
yeah,
though.
so I got a, and this was a lot, I don't know, like 2018. I'd put a bowl of water and I'd put some ice in it, and I'd get it cold, and I'd take the ice out. But let me tell you, it was so uncomfortable. Like, I hated
Mm,
that. I could
mhm.
barely keep my face in there without just feeling like I was gonna, I don't know, implode or something like ah. So I hated doing that, and it took forever for me to try to feel like I could get comfortable with it. Maybe it would have been better for me to start with wrists. I don't think I thought of
Mm.
that at that time. But I think then I had a pause of years, and then I think I was listening to Dr. Courtney Hunt. She's like, you have to get cold. And so I'm like, all right. So I went and I lived on the ocean, like pretty handy, I have to admit, for 20
Yeah.
years. So then I thought,
No,
I'm gonna go.
I live there too. I live right by the water as well. I don't go as much as in the winter time. I
But
did
there's
just,
this little,
yeah.
but the thing is you have to realize that there's this cute little insulated, let's call Lover's Point. So it was safer, except the sharks were there
Oh goodness.
after I found out after a month of going there, somebody almost died. But it was like, it was fairly benign most of the time. So I started just, and I had to literally just like run in there, and it was 50 to 55. So it's not horrible. But the ocean, I think what made it easier for me was just that it was the ocean and the minerals and all of that. And then the social, it was beautiful. And then the socializing. And so, but I think I really overdid it, but I never really felt bad. I think it just took me a while to heat up because my hands and feet were literally numb. So I did that
Yeah.
for a while, like on and off for a year or a year and a half. and now I'm in the desert. So, but
Right.
I
Well,
like
that
to go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you can do cold therapy, the best place to do it is in natural waters because you
Hmm.
are getting the grounding, you're getting all those minerals, and in a community, be careful for sharks, though, of course, that's
Yeah.
something you want to watch out for. But like natural water is the best way. I just was at the beach recently, which is crazy in January here in New York, and it was like 40 degrees out that day. And I was like, I'm gonna go put my feet in the water. But as soon as I did that, though,
Oh,
I did it for a couple minutes. My fingers, my Raynaud showed up right away. So it was like, oh,
wow.
it was too stressful. So it's like you just really tuning into your body and what it needs is most important. And that's I haven't had Raynaud's come up in a long time, but I bet you it's because I was already cold. Like my body's already cold enough, getting enough cold exposure from being it was even
Yeah.
though it was 40, it was windy at the beach, so the wind chill was much lower.
Yep.
So my body's already, and I'm walking barefoot on the beach, you know.
Oh, you're already getting a lot of cold.
So my body's already cold. So then just that pushed it over the edge, I think. So it was like, okay, this is like, that was too much. You know, that's how I know. So just listening to your body is so important. Like I think
Yeah.
that's the most important thing. And that's when I get a little bit frustrated with like seeing like these challenges, right? And people just jumping in and like showing it on Instagram. Like it's no big deal. Just fill up your ice tub and go and do it. Like, it has to be nuanced and it has to be gradual. And I think starting with things to help your body adapt to cold, like walking outside, maybe barefoot, or maybe going outside in your pajamas still with a little less clothing, or putting your hair up and letting the back of your neck get exposed. I might have said that before, but like slowly adapting. You said face dunks, wrist dunks, if you can do that. That's the better way to start than just jumping right into a tub.
Yeah, because in the beginning, when I was saying some people have this aversion to it, like that is your body's probably telling you, like, hey, we're not ready for that. So,
Yeah.
like, that sounds awful. So, like all the things you're describing, Vanessa, are so perfect. It's really walking yourself through because there is, I mean, let's be honest, we're talking about this in a podcast because there's benefit to exercising your body's mitochondrial function. That's what we're really talking about. We're enhancing your body's metabolic flexibility. We're enhancing the capacity of the mitochondria to when we get cold, the mitochondrial transport chain, like the distance between or among the right, the what do we call them?
Respiratory proteins, the
Thank you. The
spaces
respiratory
between,
proteins
yeah.
shrinks. So then
Yes.
they can make energy more efficiently. Now we want that capacity, right? That is a super great capacity that our bodies need to have, but some of us have lost that. So it's not like you can go run a marathon. Your body can also just go from never being cold to now all of a sudden we're going to kick into gear, right? So you have to basically work up to it. Super important, cannot skip it. And all the ways Vanessa's outlined are very, very helpful to, even if you're a northern haplotype, like even if you're from the Nordic or whatever, you still are going to have to work up to it. So because of the nuance, like Vanessa's saying, and for women, much more, nuanced picture for sure, you don't want to mess around with this. You just really don't.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, that's why I'm glad we're prefacing this podcast with all of that because I think it's so important. But yeah, I mean, it is honestly, the benefits are huge. Shrinking those spaces between those respiratory proteins makes the electrons tunnel more effectively. So meaning the electrons are going to jump from one space to the next faster, then you're going to make more exclusion zone water and you're going to make more ATP energy production. That's an amazing benefit. But just don't go too hard too fast with it is our point, right? And the other thing that does is it helps the body internally make more light. So cold therapy helps you actually make more infrared heat because the body's going to have to generate heat, right? And more UV light. That's why getting cold in the winter can be helpful for people who don't have UV light exposure like me. I don't have UVB all year round. So doing that, your body's making its own internal heat. It's making its own UVB light. That's amazing. Now, like I said, you don't necessarily have to dunk your body into cold water. You can take a walk outside with less clothing if that works better for you. And that's my preference. Like if I was going to pick one, and most people would rather do 2 minutes in a cold plunge, I would rather do 20 minutes outside, in less clothing. That's me. And that's what works better for me. So that's what I do.
Mhm, mhm. Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So, and also that you mentioned that, our bodies make the infrared and they make UV. And then I was reading on the Morosco Forge website that they are positing that your body uses that UV light, the biophoton emission, that your body can use that to make vitamin D.
Mhm.
So when we think about northern climate and then people who live up there and they're, oh my gosh, they're not getting UV light. Well, we're making our own internally.
Right.
And if the body, the body adapts. So that makes total sense to me that the body would be able to harness its own UV light from the mitochondria and then use that as a catalyst to then make our own vitamin D, which they're saying is not detectable in the bloodstream. So it's not going to be measurable. I don't know
Yeah.
how they're discerning this, but they're working on figuring out, how to measure all this stuff. But that's how you're going to get through the winter.
That's so cool. That's a really, I never heard that before, but it makes sense because if you are cold and you make your own internal UVB light, that's the stimulus to make vitamin D. So it's definitely possible. Morocco Forge, for those people who don't know, is an amazing cold therapy. They make an amazing cold therapy tub that you could get. They're quite expensive, but they're amazing and they're like self-cleaning and all the things, and they keep the temperature at the temperature that you set for. So they're really cool. I've got just my saltwater pool outside, or I've got a blow up one that I've used before, but it works, whatever you can do.
Or some
Uh,
people alternate hot and cold showers and that kind of thing.
yes, yes, I just did that today. Like that I'll do very regularly for me. Hot and cold showers is something that it's always in my practice and it feels good. It never feels too stressful, but it feels good. I like to end on cold personally. So I do that regularly. And I also like to do red light therapy and then cold because red light therapy is going to help your body make that more subcellular melatonin. And then you get a little bit cold, then it shrinks the spaces. It's a good combination. So
Mhm.
I tend to do that as well. There was something else. Oh, I wanted to say also nature never makes mistakes. It never makes mistakes. So there's always going to be ways for your body if you're living in an environment where there's no UVB light around. Nature's going to provide a way for it to happen, right? So that the cold is away. Also, the darkness is away because when your body makes more melatonin through honoring darkness, right, that also binds to the vitamin D receptors. So then your body is using melatonin to supplement kind of what vitamin D would be doing in your body. So it's like melatonin is the hormone of winter, vitamin D is the hormone of summer, right? And your body just naturally can use both effectively to activate the same pathways depending on if you're giving it the correct appropriate signals that it's winter, right?
Mhm.
Which means you can't
Right.
live in the never-ending summer and have the lights on all the time and signaling abundance of carbohydrates and signaling the abundance of light. You have to give your body that is cold, dark, and scarcity in that environment. Not totally to like a detriment. You just can't be living in like tons of carbohydrates and tons of light all winter long, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to have your heat on 75 and 80 and then be eating all
Yeah.
kinds of tropical fruit. That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Just being aware of, those extreme differences that if it's so far away from what your area, the region you live in, if there's no tropical food anywhere near you, then don't eat it in the winter. Maybe in the summer, if even if it doesn't grow, but it's like 100 out, okay, it's not gonna, be a
Right.
make
Like
a
if
big
I ate a
deal.
mango here in the summer, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's not like
And
the end of the world.
yeah,
Like, yeah, it's fine. But if I eat that same mango here in the winter, well, that's probably not going to work as well in my body.
and the
That's,
light code of the electrons in the mango are gonna be so different from what your body's experiencing.
yes. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. So,
So you mentioned the brown fat, right? So the brown fat is the type of fat that is right here and then around your organs, right? It's just kind of like a
mhm,
protective fat is how I like to think of it. The brown adipose tissue, it's very
mhm.
metabolically active. And the mitochondria there especially need that cold exposure to have their workout, and they get that workout in winter, right? They use, and then so also when you cold plunge, you deplete your glucose, right? And that's because the brown fat is just like using all that glucose up. But so those areas, when you have them exposed, like when you say, Vanessa, you put your hair up and then you go outside with fewer clothes on and this area exposed, that's the reason.
That's the reason, yes, because you're activating that brown fat adipose tissue. And yeah, exactly. It's going to help your body generate the heat and release the glucose. And it's going to help your body actually, it's a way to burn more calories and burn more fat in your body. Like it helps your body actually burn fat. That's why it's one of the reasons why cold therapy works. It helps reset your leptin and it helps reset your, your insulin and your glucose, or it relieves, it pushes some out. So you are going to actually, it's a strategy for weight loss, like cold therapy. It really is. And it's an effective one as well. So it's a pretty cool thing that it aids in the fat loss, which is the white fat, which is where energy is stored. So it helps maintain better blood sugar and insulin levels if you do cold therapy, which
Yeah, it's like
is
a workout, like as if you're exercising without actually doing cardio or whatever. It's
yes.
just the cold that's doing all of the action. Hmm.
Yes, the cold is doing the action instead of actually you doing that hit workout.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like in place of the hit workout. So don't do the hit workout and the cold, don't get your body too stressed, but yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
benefits, increase metabolism, which is what you were just talking about, energy production and so forth, metabolic flexibility. We can become more cold adapted so that, because really metabolic flexibility, what does that mean? Like we can tolerate more easily extreme temperatures, like cold or hot. That's
mhm.
a sign of metabolic flexibility. So the people become like really discomfited when it's hot and then they're like super uncomfortable in the cold. They need to work on getting their metabolic flexibility enhanced for sure. Excuse
Mhm,
me.
mhm,
So the pain relief is also really huge, right?
mhm. Yeah, no, it's actually a really, really big benefit of cold is pain
So
relief.
decrease inflammation.
Yes, yeah, 100%, 100%. Circulation can be helpful. Leptin signaling, like I mentioned before, improve stress resistance, improve mood, weight loss, better glucose and insulin signaling. So there's a lot of benefits to cold, but just I think the most important takeaway is not to hear all those benefits and just like I said before, like Heather said before, just to go jump into it, right? Like that's the thing. Like, oh, people hear all these benefits are like, okay, 0 to 100, let's do it. And don't overdo it. Like, I don't think you need to do it. Like, if you decide you're ready to do cold plunges, you've been building up your tolerance, you're gradually getting into it. You don't, more is not better necessarily, right? We are a culture where we think more is always better. And that's not necessarily true with a lot of things. Like, one of the things that I keep saying to myself is the pause is just as important as the push. And it's like what that means is, and I can take that to so many different levels, right? And so many different things I do in my life, allowing the integration to happen from whatever modality you've just used is so important. So your body needs time to adjust, right? Like allow for whatever you've stimulus you just given to actually provide the benefit. Like, so allow the integration to happen. Allow the body to do what it needs to do with the information that you just sent it, if that
Yeah,
helps.
that is like equally as if maybe even more important because that's where the change and the magic's happening. Give the
Yes.
stimulus and then you need the response. The pause is, excuse me, where all of the things are happening as far as the adaptation goes.
Yeah. And also, I want to remind people that any exposure below 98.6 is technically cold therapy. So you do not need to make the water if you decide to do plunges or wrist dunks or face dunks, whatever. It doesn't need to be 30 degrees. It doesn't need to be ice water. You can start at like a 60, 65. And honestly, you're still going to get a benefit from that. There's still a benefit from that. It does not have to be harder, Wim Hof type. It just doesn't.
No, no. And I think there's cold exposure light, right? So I have only turned the heat on in my house a couple of times so far this winter. And in the morning it's, 28, 32, whatever, but I have, thank God, good insulation. But so it stays around 50 in here. Some when it goes below 50, I'm like, I'm turning the heat on. Like I'm not just gonna freeze my ass off all the time, right? But it has been cold, like 50, 55. And then when I was sick, I'm like two down jackets on, and then finally I turned the heat on. So I relented because I just had the chills. But that's kind of like to me, cold thermogenesis light. Like it's not necessarily going to do a whole heck of a lot as far as in the big heavy duty change stuff.
Mhm, mhm.
However, you're still sending your body signals that it's winter. So you're staying like their circannual, seasonal shifts and whatnot. My body knows it's winter. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? Because it's like otherwise it'd be 100 degrees in the summer. So I do like that, but you don't have to do that. But I would caution people not to keep it super warm either,
No. Mm-mm.
because then your body is confused. Because then you go outside, hopefully you're going outside enough, and then it's like, 30, and your body's like, what is going on? It's confusing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Definitely, definitely, definitely. I think that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of metabolic issues is because people always got they're always living in 70-degree temperature. Like that's your body should be experiencing the shifts in the temperature. So yeah, we do the same. We have pipes, so we can't not have the heat on because it would
You'll
freeze. So
freeze.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to be put that out there because I don't want anybody to freeze their pipes. So it depends on what kind of heating system you have. So the pipes can freeze if you don't have your heat on when it gets that cold. So you don't want that to happen. But we don't keep it warm. We keep it about 60. So that's pretty, it's not that hot and it's pretty chilly in our house. So that's good.
And even though I have a coat on, I still like can feel the cold, my extremities, and that's fine. Like I don't literally need to be shivering. I just don't want it to be
You
so
don't want to be
where I'm like
shivering.
super relaxed and like I don't need any coat. I do want it to be cool, but that's just another way to adapt to foster the adaptation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so get that cold air exposure, get outside. A great way that I've heard Carrie Be Wellness always say is to go outside like first thing in the morning at sunrise barefoot. And this is what I actually do and stand there until you feel cold, like until you start to like shiver. And that might be 30 seconds for you. It might be a minute, it might be two, it might be three. It might hopefully over time you'll be able to tolerate longer. So like when you're going out for your sunrise, just go outside in your PJs barefoot. And if you're really cold, you know, and you start to shiver, once you get a shiver response, you've activated something, is what she would say. Well, that was the point. The shiver response means that you started to activate some of those pathways. So, all right, then you're done. Go in. That's a good way to start, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, we talked about alternating hot and cold showers. That's another great way to start as well. Just you can do like if you really hate cold, just you put it on for like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, right? Like you can slowly start doing that and just keep increasing it, but listen to your body and how do you feel after that, right? Always tuning in. Like, how did I feel after, alternating hot and cold in my shower? Did it make me feel better or worse? I'll tell you what, if it's at night when I take a shower, I don't want cold. I don't. I want a warm shower before bed. But
Me too.
if it's a morning shower, then I'm okay with the cold. But that's also makes sense, right?
Because your cortisol's higher. Yeah.
Right, it makes sense. So my body wants a warm shower at night. So that's what I do. So you have to be, everything in this conversation is very nuanced and you have to be paying attention to how you feel, right? And then Heather also mentioned, the wrist dunking, the face dunking, 1 to 3 minutes, like in the morning is a good time. It's actually going to wake you up, especially if you're like chronic fatigue. It's going to help your body increase that cortisol. Like that can be a really good time to do it. An ice pack at the back of the neck is also a good place to do it, where the brown fat is, activates the vagus nerve, right?
You know those people who buy, they have or who wear rather the ice, like you can refrigerate
The
these
vests, yeah,
vests.
the
What do you
cold
think of
vest.
those? What do you think of those?
I think that's cool. I think that's a great idea. I think it's good. I know Sarah Kleiner used to do that. I know my friend Miley does it as well, who I run the group coaching with. She does it. And I would probably think that would be cool to try. Yeah, I think it would be good. I think they're good. I think it's a good way to start. I think it's a good way to help your body adapt. Yeah. Um, yeah. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah. Mm,
So, and I think you already mentioned this, but just not anything below 98.6 is cold therapy. You did say that, right?
yeah.
So, not medical advice. None of this is medical advice. You guys, you have to experiment and find your own way of things that practices of how you're going to do cold applications that's going to be best for you. So, this is a right? Self-led. It's not about us telling you. You can sense what's going to be helpful for your body.
Yeah. And I would say men probably could tolerate colder temperatures than women for sure.
More, yeah, more
Yeah,
easily.
because yeah, I would because cold therapy affects the hormones so greatly, right? And I just think men are more of that masculine energy, go harder, like they can handle more of that. Like it still could be overdone, but I think they can handle more, so they might be able to handle colder. And always pay attention to how you feel, but also like pay attention to your cycle and where you're at if you're a woman. So if it's like ovulation time, that might not be a good time. Or if it's like the day before your period, that might not be a good time. I actually had a situation. This was back in the fall. This is how much cold thermogenesis affects the hormones. Okay, Heather. It was in the fall, and I jumped in the cold plunge, and it was probably in my luteal phase, but I wasn't expecting my period. That day, I had right after the cold therapy, I had pretty bad cramps and a backache, and I got my period really early. And I was like,
Wow.
that's how much the cold can affect us. So we have to, like, the follicular phase is a much better time for women to be cold plunging than ovulation and luteal phase.
Mhm.
So that's the best time to probably do that cold plunging if you are a cycling woman. Now, if you've already in menopause, that might
Well, my
be,
guess for menopause would be, yeah, no, so the picture changes. However,
yeah,
I do think that, especially depending on your level of health, like if you tend to be a little more like me, I'm not the most like vigorous. My mitochondria are a little more on the fragile side, so I have to be very cautious because remember, all stress becomes a bigger factor in menopause because your
yeah.
adrenals have to take over everything. Now they're producing all your sex hormones because the ovaries are done, kaput. And so if you have too much stress coming in, then then they have the pregnenolone still where
Yep.
your the steroid hormones, you know, pregnenolone still is when your master hormone pregnenolone, instead of going to create sex hormones, now it's going to go to create the stress hormones.
And it
That's not
does that when you're too stressed.
yeah, when you're too stressed out, then it shuttles it this way because there's an emergency. We need to make more stress hormones. So that's why CT, it's really good, obviously, for weight and all these things and inflammation. But still, as a woman, all your life, you need to be mindful of these hormonal factors and take it easy, right? And just slowly build up to it. So this leads us to our next topic is who should not do cold therapy or what are the precautions and caveats, right? So that's one of them
Yeah.
is you need to know your overall level of hardiness, maybe what we call in homeopathy your level of health. Are you a person who can get high fevers? Then you have a high level of health. If you haven't had a high fever for since you can never remember, not that you have a horrible level of health, but it's not in the high. Let's just say that.
hmm Yeah, I just wanted to comment on your pregnenolone steal syndrome, which
Okay.
is so important. Is I always tell the story that when I went carnivore and I had no carbs for months, I lost my cycle, and I got a Dutch test at that time, which obviously I didn't need a Dutch test to tell you my hormones were flatlined, but literally, but I did because I didn't know any better back then, right? And I get the hormone test back on the Dutch test, and she's like, "You're like a 65-year-old woman. Only hormone you're making is cortisol."
Wow.
Literally. And that's because my body, and I was also cold plunging at this time. I was cold plunging at this time.
Wow.
I was just doing a lot of things that were very stress. I was over stressing my body. I was fasting, eating no carbs, and cold plunging. This is like stressor upon stressor upon stressor to the body. And the body's like, we are just too stressed to do anything else. We're not going to reproduce. We're not going to have children. We're not going to do anything else. And it was all I did was my every pregnant mom. And even though I was seeing the sunrise at that time, I was already at seeing the sunrise at that time. That was not enough because my body was still too stressed. Because when you see the sunrise, that will activate the mitochondria to make pregnenolone, and it will tell the body to funnel it to make sex hormones as well as cortisol. It should make both. But my body, because I was too stressed, was just making cortisol and no other sex hormones. So that's why I'm cautious with these things with my clients. I'm cautious with these things on a podcast to just be like, yeah, go do cold plunging. No, you have to like work with somebody, help maybe get a guide, or if you don't want to coach, then you've got to be really diligent about checking in with yourself and noticing the symptomology that's occurring. If your period or your period has shifted where all of a sudden it's coming really late or it's coming too close together, if you're having more symptomology, these are signs that something's not right here. Or if you lose your period, these are all signs, right? So as a woman, you can look for those. But yeah, I think if you have like a cold or a flu or any kind of like acute symptoms that you're trying to get over, that's not the time for a cold plunge. Your body doesn't need a cold plunge at that time. It doesn't need a stressor. It needs something that more restorative stuff. It needs more rest. It needs to not go to work for a couple of days. It needs to take a couple of days off, right?
Or sleep. Yep.
Yeah, it needs more sleep. It needs more bone broth, possibly. It needs more herbal tea. It needs to sit in front of the fireplace, those kinds of things, the more restorative practices, not something that's going to make you more stressed. And I also think cold plunging for women who are super, super stressed, They're like activating the cortisol response just from their lifestyle. So say they're a typical modern woman, right, who is working the typical 9 to 5 job. They're doing their HIIT workouts in the morning. They're getting the artificial blue light at night. They're doing all the things that are already activating all the cortisol and all the stress, right? They're like never take a break. They're just, they're running marathons. They're doing all things. This cold therapy is not the place to start for them. They need to like tone all that other stuff down first before we're doing cold therapy. And then if you've lost your cycle, cold therapy is probably not the way to go. We're needing more. Your body needs the signal. If you've lost your cycle, you have low leptin, right? Danny Hamilton just talked about this on the podcast we did with her. So if you've lost your cycle, right, you're in a state of low leptin. Your body is in too much scarcity. Your body doesn't need more stressors. It needs more things that are going to give it signal abundance,
And
right?
safety. It's all about safety.
Safety. Thank
Yeah.
you. Safety. It needs safety signals and it needs abundance signals so the body can get out of that stress loop. And then I said before and during cycles as well. So yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Um, Also people who are very, very underweight, I would say, because again, they're in that low leptin state. So that could be if they have a very weak constitution. That's the kind of a weak constitution is they never get fevers. They constantly get sick. They can't put on weight. That would also be another weak constitution. They're just literally constantly getting sick. You might want to, or you have a lot of chronic conditions. You might want to be cautious. And then people who are sensitive to cold, damp, like if you have a very strong calc carb layer or a Rhus tox layer, these are homeopathic terms, but these people are very sensitive to cold, damp, and they will actually get symptomology from the cold. Like they will be in cold and this will activate symptoms. So it's all again about paying attention to how you feel. If you have a fear of water, that might not be for you. If you're pregnant, I would be cautious. Absolutely. If you have hypothyroidism or even hyper, I would be cautious. So just take it slow. And I think work with somebody is a good plan as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've
Yeah.
covered a lot so far. Is there anything else we need to mention, Vanessa?
Um, yeah, I think we're pretty good. I think I would also say that people who it would be good for is likely men who are overweight. So people who are in a high leptin state, that's who cold therapy is good for. People possibly with chronic pain or lower energy, this could be good. And like signs that cold therapy is working is, well, actually, I've had this symptom before, but an urge to urinate after being in the cold, because
I
it's
thought that
actually
was just like normal. That's a
actually
good thing.
what I've heard is that it's helping your body release deuterium.
Oh, how interesting. I
And
didn't.
I honestly think that's also what's happening when you're in ketosis, because in ketosis people will pee a lot more,
Right, right.
myself included, and you're getting rid of deuterium. That's what I've
Oh,
heard.
okay.
What the science behind that is, I'm not sure. It's anecdotal, it's what I've heard, but those are signs that it's helping reduce inflammation, also reducing sugar cravings. Would be one. Improved energy. So these are the signs to look for if these are good signs that you're doing cold therapy, you're having less sugar
Working.
cravings. Yeah. You're having more energy, you're having better sleep, you're having increased maybe desire on the sexual sphere. These are good signs. If you do cold therapy and you're waking up at 3 a.m. with a cortisol rise, and heart palpitations, it's not your medicine. you know?
Back off. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we covered it, but I wanted to mention those few things. Like look for the signs that it is working. Better energy, better sleep. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and for those who want more guidance on this, tell them about your offer, Vanessa, which is very, very helpful. You need some direction possibly. If you have
Yeah.
any concern at all, I would look to Vanessa's special webinar on this.
Oh, I just have a webinar on how to thrive in winter. So I talk more about cold therapy in that as well. So you could check out my How to Thrive in Winter webinar. So one of the strategies is, cold therapy in winter, but it doesn't have to be like what I said. It doesn't have to be plunges. But I think if you really have a chronic condition, that you're trying to reverse, and you want to use cold therapy, that winter webinar is super supportive, but also working with somebody. I take one-to-one clients. I have group coaching coming up actually in March. So that would be as a good way to do it as well, because if we're so out of touch with our body, sometimes we need a guide and support on whether or not a practice is good for us or not, and if it's helping us. So
Mhm.
that's where coaches come in to help you with that. So yeah, I would recommend that as well. But yeah, if the Thrive in Winter webinar, if you're able to be in touch with your body and understand what's working for you, that would be a good place to go and learn all the strategies to help winter be a healing season, not just cold therapy. So
Yep,
yeah,
yep. And it can
yeah,
help with your mood too. So feel free to book a
yes.
session with me, you guys, if you want help with not only just mood, but all the things we've already mentioned. Because like Vanessa's saying, sometimes we really have a hard time at first deciphering our body's symptoms to really see the big picture. And so we can help kind of take an assessment of what your history is and where you're at now and make a plan that's the most tailored to who you are right now.
And homeopathy too, I will
And
say.
homeopathy.
If you are a person who is in a constitutional state that just does not do well with cold, that's something that Heather and I look for in homeopathic sessions. It's one of the main questions we ask. Are you aggravated heat? Are you aggravated cold? What are your symptoms worse? We look at what we call modalities. And that helps us guide to the right remedy for you. But then it also, given the right remedy for you, it can help, you'll be better with those things. You won't have symptoms from cold, damp anymore. You won't have symptoms from the sun, if that's your one of your issues. So we support clients in that way as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I hope this has been helpful, everyone. Please go ahead and check us out on YouTube and Spotify and Apple. Leave us a review up to 5 stars. Send us any messages through our email. We found out that the message button through Buzzsprout, we can't actually see who it is and respond to them.
Oh yeah,
Send us a message through another program like YouTube or
yeah.
Instagram, whatnot.
YouTube is an easy way to I can
Yeah.
respond to. So
Yeah.
please go
And then
there.
let us know what you want to hear or any people you want us to see about interviewing. We welcome all of your feedback. So.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that. All right, guys, have a great week. See you next time.